Hello, welcome to another video on our channel. Here we translate testimonies from people who have had near-death experiences and other spiritual experiences. Today we are going to know the story of Adrian Blackwood. He says he died, visited hell, and visited the apocalypse. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Leave a comment with your name and city. Now let's listen to Adrian's testimony. My name is Adrian Blackwood, and a year ago my existence was completely redefined. At 45, I was the embodiment of corporate success in New York. As a lawyer specializing in mergers and acquisitions, my name was synonymous with victories in court and million-dollar deals. My life was a frantic race against the clock, driven by the adrenaline of closing monumental deals in the gaming industry. I grew up in a middle-class family in Connecticut, the only child of ambitious parents who always encouraged me to strive for the top. From an early age, I learned that success was measured by tangible achievements, high grades, awards, recognition. This mindset led me to Harvard Law School, where I excelled not only academically, but also in the art of making strategic connections. After graduation, I dove headfirst into the corporate world of New York. The first few years were full of hard work and sleepless nights, but each case won, each deal closed, was another step on the ladder of success. In a few years, I became a junior partner, and at 40, I was already one of the main names in the firm. My wife, Evelyn, a talented visual artist, was the opposite of everything I stood for. While I lived for numbers and contracts, she saw the world through colors and shapes. We met at a contemporary art exhibition. I was there to network. She was there to present her works. It was a clash of worlds that surprisingly resulted in a marriage. Our relationship, however, was constantly tested by my lifestyle. Evelyn often warned me about the dangers of excessive stress, but I saw her concerns as the exaggerations of an artist out of touch with the realities of the corporate world. For me, constant pressure was the price to pay for success. My daily routine was a never-ending marathon. I woke up at 5 a.m., went to the gym, more out of obligation than pleasure, and at 7 I was already at the office. Meetings followed without a break, lunches were eaten between calls, and it was common for me to still be working when most people were already at home with their families. Weekends, when I wasn't traveling for work, were dedicated to strategic social events. Dinners, golf outings, charity parties, everything was an opportunity to network and close deals. Evelyn rarely accompanied me to these events, preferring the solitude of her studio. I boasted about my stamina, proud that I could function on just 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. Coffee, energy drinks, and occasionally something stronger kept my mind sharp and my body moving. I ignored the warning signs, the frequent headaches, the pressure in my chest, the sleepless nights. For me, they were just minor inconveniences on the way to the top. Little did I know that I was heading towards a precipice. The universe was about to teach me a lesson that no elite university or law firm could teach. A lesson about life, death, and the true meaning of success. A lesson that would begin with a heart attack in the middle of an afternoon at work and would take me on a journey beyond the limits of physical existence. This is the story of how I died, and how, in dying, I finally learned to live. It was a Tuesday in November 2022, a day that started like any other, but that would change my life forever. I woke up before the alarm clock as usual and found Evelyn still sleeping. I looked at her for a moment, noticing the worry lines on her face even in her sleep. A pang of guilt hit me, but I shook it off quickly. I had an important day ahead of me. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m. sharp. The place was already in an uproar, despite the time. We were in the middle of one of the biggest mergers in the history of the gaming industry, and the pressure was palpable. My secretary, Janet, handed me a stack of documents as I entered my office. "Mr. Blackwood, the West Coast Games team is waiting for your call, and Mr. Yamamoto from Tokyo has asked to reschedule the video conference for 2 p.m. I nodded absently, already dialing the number for West Coast Games. The next few hours were a blur of negotiations, contract reviews, and heated arguments. I skipped lunch, content with a sandwich between meetings. At 3 p.m., I was reviewing the last clauses of the contract with my colleague, Helen Fisher. That's when it happened. In the middle of a sentence about royalty percentages, I felt a sudden pressure in my chest. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just another symptom of stress. But within seconds, the pressure turned into a sharp pain, as if an elephant was sitting on top of me. My body froze. Sweat began to run down my forehead, and an inexplicable panic took over me. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Helen realized something was wrong and stood up, alarmed. "Adrian, are you okay?" I couldn't respond. My vision started to blur, and I felt my body falling forward. I heard Helen scream as if it came from far away. Papers flew, and I felt the hot liquid from the coffee spilling onto the table in my suit. The pain was unbearable, unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was as if someone was squeezing my heart with an iron fist. I tried to breathe, but my lungs seemed to have forgotten how to work. The sounds around me blended into a confusing cacophony. Screams, rushing footsteps, someone shouting to call an ambulance. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion and at breakneck speed at the same time. My thoughts were confused. Flashes of memory flashed before my eyes. Evelyn smiling at our wedding. My dad patted me on the back when I got into Harvard. My mother's disappointed expression when she said she wouldn't come to her birthday because of an important case. Amidst the chaos, a clear thought emerged. Is this how I'm going to die? In my office, drowned in papers and spilled coffee? The irony did not escape me, even in that moment of agony. I felt hands turning me around, someone loosening my tie. A distant voice said, "Stay with us, Mr. Blackwood. The ambulance is arriving." But I was slipping away, the darkness closing in around me. My last conscious thought was of Evelyn. I wanted to tell her that I was sorry, that she was right all along. I wanted a chance to do things differently. And then, darkness swallowed me. What happened next defies any rational explanation. Doctors may call hallucinations caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain. Skeptics would say it was just a vivid dream brought on by the stress of the moment. But I know with every fiber of my being that what I experienced was real as the ground beneath our feet, as true as the air we breathe. Because in that moment, when my heart stopped beating and my brain started to shut down, I didn't just die. I traveled to a place beyond human understanding, a realm that challenges our notions of reality and existence. And it was there, in that space between life and death, that my true journey began. The darkness that enveloped me was not the emptiness I expected. It was dense, palpable as if swimming in an ocean of ink. There was no sensation of body, nor of time or space. I was just consciousness floating in nothingness. Then suddenly there was light. Not the soft, welcoming light that people often describe in near-death experiences. This light was intense, almost painful, with shades of red and orange that resembled fire and blood. Little by little, a landscape began to form around me. The sky was a raging storm of black and crimson clouds, swirling in a menacing whirlwind. The ground beneath my feet, for now I seemed to have a body again, was rocky and uneven, made of a substance that resembled obsidian, but which pulsed with an internal red glow, as if there were lava flowing beneath. The air was heavy and suffocating, filled with a strong smell of sulfur that made my eyes burn. The temperature was unbearably high, as if it were inside an oven. Each breath was an effort, the hot air burning my lungs. I looked around, trying to understand where I was. It was then that I saw the figures. At first, I thought they were strange rock formations, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized with horror that they were people, or something that once was people. Tormented figures writhed everywhere. Some were partially fused to the rocks, their bodies blending with the stone in a grotesque symbiosis. Others wandered aimlessly, moaning in agony. I saw creatures tearing apart their own flesh, only to see it instantly regenerate, perpetuating an endless cycle of self-mutilation. The horror of that sight was unimaginable. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. I was trapped, unable to move or look away from this nightmare. One figure in particular caught my attention. It was a man, or what was left of him. His skin was in tatters, hanging in strips that revealed muscle and bone beneath. His eyes were empty wells that seemed to look straight into my soul. When he spoke, his voice was a hoarse whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Welcome, Adrian," he said, and the sound of my name in that place filled me with dread. "We've been waiting for you." I wanted to ask where I was, what that place was, but the words stuck in my throat. As if reading my thoughts, the figure continued. This is what you built, Adrian. Every unfair contract, every life ruined by your greed, every moment of kindness ignored in the name of profit. It all helped build this place." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. My mind screamed in denial, but deep down, I knew it was true. Every selfish decision, every time I chose personal gain over the common good, it was all there, manifested in that personal hell. I tried to argue, to justify my actions, but the words died before reaching my lips. How could I justify a lifetime of selfishness and greed in the face of that manifestation of suffering? The figure approached, and I could smell rotting flesh and hopelessness emanating from it. "You have a choice to make, Adrian," she said, her voice now an intimate whisper in my ear. "You can accept your place here, join us in the eternity of torment you have built for yourself, or you can try to change." Before I could respond, I heard a deafening roar. The ground shook violently, and the clouds in the sky parted, revealing something that made my blood run cold. Descending from the clouds came a creature that defied understanding. It was a gigantic humanoid, but without skin, its body a pulsating mass of exposed blood vessels and muscles. Its mouth, an abyss filled with endless rows of razor-sharp teeth, opened in a scream that shook the very foundations of that hellish world. The smell emanating from the creature was indescribable, a mixture of decomposition, blood, and something even deeper and more disturbing. Every step he took caused the ground to shake, and the other tormented souls fled in panic. I wanted to run, but I was paralyzed by fear. The creature approached, its eyes, if they could be called that, fixed on me. I felt the weight of all my sins, all my failures, pulling me down. It was then that something unexpected happened. A point of light, small but intense, appeared in the stormy sky. The demonic creature hesitated, its attention momentarily diverted. In that moment of hesitation, I felt a different presence. A hand, made of pure light, reached towards me. Without thinking, I grabbed it, and everything changed. The moment my hand touched that light, the hellish world around me began to dissolve. The demonic creature, the tormented souls, the obsidian floor, everything vanished like smoke carried by the wind. The sensation was of being pulled upwards at breakneck speed, through layers and layers of reality. The colors around me changed drastically. The red and black tones gave way to pure, intense white, so bright it should have been painful to look at, but it wasn't. On the contrary, it was comforting, like being enveloped in a warm, welcoming hug. The oppression and fear I felt in the hellish realm were replaced by a feeling of indescribable lightness and peace. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Not just the weight of my physical body, but the weight of all the worries, fears, and anxieties I carried. As the ascension slowed, I began to realize I was in a completely different place. There was no solid ground beneath my feet, no sky above. It was a vast space of pure light and vibrant energy. Shapes and colors danced around me, creating complex and beautiful patterns that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. The air, if you could call it that, was light and invigorating. Each breath filled me with a vitality I had never experienced before. My senses seemed to have been magnified exponentially. I could see colors that did not exist in the Earth's spectrum, hear harmonies that no human instrument could produce. It was then that I realized I wasn't alone. Around me there were other presences. They had no defined shapes. They were more like fields of light energy, each with its own vibration and unique personality. Somehow I knew they were other souls, some familiar, others completely unknown. One of these presences stood out. It was brighter and more intense than the others, radiating an aura of infinite wisdom and compassion. It had no human form, but somehow I knew that this was the entity that had reached out to me, rescuing me from hell. When he spoke, it was not with words, but with thoughts and emotions that flowed directly into my consciousness. "Welcome, Adrian," said the presence, and the feeling was completely different from when the tormented figure in hell had greeted me. This greeting was full of unconditional love and acceptance. I wanted to speak, ask questions, but before I could formulate a coherent thought, the entity continued. "You went through an ordeal, Adrian. What you experienced was a reflection of your own actions and choices. But it wasn't a punishment, it was a learning opportunity." I felt a wave of shame and regret wash over me as I remembered all the things I had done wrong in my life. The greed, the selfishness, the people I hurt in my blind pursuit of success. The entity, sensing my thoughts, emanated a wave of understanding and forgiveness. "Don't torture yourself with the past, Adrian. What matters now is what you do with this experience." Suddenly I saw my entire life unfold before me. It wasn't a simple replay of events, but a deep understanding of how every choice I made affected not just me, but everyone around me. I saw Evelyn's hurt face every time I prioritized work over our relationship. I saw the looks of disappointment on my parents' faces when I missed important moments in their lives. I saw the anonymous faces of people affected by the businesses I closed, families destroyed by mass layoffs, communities ruined by predatory business practices. But I also saw the moments of kindness, however rare they were. The time I helped an intern pay his college fees, the day I defended pro bono a family about to lose their home. Small acts of kindness that I had forgotten about, but that made a difference in someone's life. The light entity spoke again. "Do you see now, Adrian? Every action, every choice, has consequences that go far beyond what we can imagine. You have the power to create heavens or hells, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you." I felt a wave of understanding wash over me. All my life I had sought success and power, thinking it would bring me happiness and fulfillment. But now I saw clearly the emptiness of that search. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice shaking with the emotion of the revelation. The entity emanated a sense of gentle determination. "That's up to you, Adrian. You can choose to return and continue your journey on Earth, or you can choose to stay and continue your evolution here." The choice seemed obvious. This place of light and peace was everything I could have wanted. Why would he return to the world of pain and conflict he had left? But then, an image of Evelyn appeared in my mind, and with it, the understanding that my journey on Earth was not complete. There was a lot to correct, a lot of good to do. Before I could express my decision, the light entity said, "Remember, Adrian, the true purpose of life is not to accumulate wealth or power, but to grow in love and wisdom. Every challenge is a learning opportunity, every interaction a chance to spread light." With those words, I felt a change. The world of light began to dissolve, and I felt myself being pulled back. The last thing I heard before returning was the entity's gentle voice. "Go in peace, Adrian, and remember, you are never alone." And then, with a sudden, painful sigh, I opened my eyes to the world of the living. The moment my hand touched that light, the hellish world around me began to dissolve. The demonic creature, the tormented souls, the obsidian floor, everything vanished like smoke carried by the wind. The sensation was of being pulled upwards at breakneck speed through layers and layers of reality. The colors around me changed drastically. The red and black tones gave way to pure, intense white, so bright it should have been painful to look at, but it wasn't. On the contrary, it was comforting, like being enveloped in a warm, welcoming hug. The oppression and fear I felt in the hellish realm were replaced by a feeling of indescribable lightness and peace. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, not just the weight of my physical body, but the weight of all the worries, fears, and anxieties I carried. As the ascension slowed, I began to realize I was in a completely different place. There was no solid ground beneath my feet, no sky above. It was a vast space of pure light and vibrant energy. Shapes and colors danced around me, creating complex and beautiful patterns that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. The air, if you could call it that, was light and invigorating. Each breath filled me with a vitality I had never experienced before. My senses seemed to have been magnified exponentially. I could see colors that did not exist in the Earth's spectrum, hear harmonies that no human instrument could produce. It was then that I realized I wasn't alone. Around me there were other presences. They had no defined shapes, they were more like fields of light energy, each with its own vibration and unique personality. Somehow I knew they were other souls, some familiar, others completely unknown. One of these presences stood out. It was brighter and more intense than the others, radiating an aura of infinite wisdom and compassion. It had no human form, but somehow I knew that this was the entity that had reached out to me, rescuing me from hell. When he spoke, it was not with words, but with thoughts and emotions that flowed directly into my consciousness. "Welcome, Adrian," said the presence, and the sensation was completely different from when the tormented figure in hell had greeted me. This greeting was full of unconditional love and acceptance. I wanted to speak, ask questions, but before I could formulate a coherent thought, the entity continued. "You went through an ordeal, Adrian. What you experienced was a reflection of your own actions and choices, but it wasn't a punishment. It was a learning opportunity." I felt a wave of shame and regret wash over me as I remembered all the things I had done wrong in my life. The greed, the selfishness, the people I hurt in my blind pursuit of success. The entity, sensing my thoughts, emanated a wave of understanding and forgiveness. "Don't torture yourself with the past, Adrian. What matters now is what you do with this experience." Suddenly I saw my entire life unfold before me. It wasn't a simple replay of events, but a deep understanding of how every choice I made affected not just me, but everyone around me. I saw Evelyn's hurt face every time I prioritized work over our relationship. I saw the looks of disappointment on my parents' faces when I missed important moments in their lives. I saw the anonymous faces of people affected by the businesses I closed, families destroyed by mass layoffs, communities ruined by predatory business practices. But I also saw the moments of kindness, however rare they were. The time I helped an intern pay his college fees. The day I defended pro bono a family about to lose their home. Small acts of kindness that I had forgotten about. But that made a difference in someone's life. The light entity spoke again. "Do you see now, Adrian? Every action, every choice, has consequences that go far beyond what we can imagine. You have the power to create heavens or hells, not just for yourself but for everyone around you." I felt a wave of understanding wash over me. All my life, I had sought success and power, thinking it would bring me happiness and fulfillment. But now I saw clearly the emptiness of that search. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice shaking with the emotion of the revelation. The entity emanated a sense of gentle determination. "That's up to you, Adrian. You can choose to return and continue your journey on Earth, or you can choose to stay and continue your evolution here." The choice seemed obvious. This place of light and peace was everything I could have wanted. Why would he return to the world of pain and conflict he had left? But then, an image of Evelyn appeared in my mind, and with it, the understanding that my journey on Earth was not complete. There was a lot to correct, a lot of good to do. Before I could express my decision, the light entity said, "Remember, Adrian, the true purpose of life is not to accumulate wealth or power, but to grow in love and wisdom. Every challenge is a learning opportunity. Every interaction, a chance to spread light. With those words, I felt a change. The world of light began to dissolve, and I felt myself being pulled back. The last thing I heard before returning was the entity's gentle voice. Go in peace, Adrian. And remember, you are never alone. And then, with a sudden painful sigh, I opened my eyes to the world of the living. The return to consciousness was abrupt and disorienting. The soft, ethereal light of the spiritual realm gave way to the impersonal, fluorescent lights of a hospital room. The contemplative silence was replaced by the constant beeping of heart monitors and the low hum of medical equipment. My eyes slowly opened, blinking several times to adjust to the brightness. My entire body hurt, as if I had been run over by a truck. I tried to move, but every muscle protested. An oxygen mask covered my face, and tubes and wires seemed to connect me to a variety of machines. "He is waking up," I heard a voice exclaim. Within seconds, the room was filled with activity. Doctors and nurses crowded around my bed, checking vitals and asking questions I could barely process. Among the confusion of voices and movements, I saw a familiar face. Evelyn. She was there, her eyes red and swollen from crying, holding my hand so tightly that I could feel it despite the numbness in my limbs. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "You came back to me." I wanted to speak, to tell her how sorry I was, how much I loved her, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could do was squeeze her hand lightly, hoping she would understand. The following days were a blur of tests, appointments, and gradual recovery. I learned that I had been dead for almost 5 minutes before emergency personnel were able to resuscitate me. From a medical perspective, it was a miracle that I survived without significant brain damage. Dr. Marcus Bennett, the cardiologist who cared for me, explained the extent of the damage to my heart and the long road to recovery that lay ahead. "Mr. Blackwood, you were very lucky," he said, his voice serious but gentle. "But you need to understand that your life will have to change drastically from now on." I nodded, knowing that the change he was talking about went far beyond diet and exercise. The experience I had changed so much more than just my physical heart. As I regained my strength, I began to tell Evelyn about my experience. I talked about the hell I saw, the torment I felt, and the ascension to the light. I spoke about the deep understanding I had about my actions and their consequences. Evelyn listened to everything with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Adrian," she said softly after I finished, "you've been through something extraordinary, but what's important now is how you're going to live from now on." Her words echoed those of the light entity, and I knew she was right. The near-death experience was just the beginning. The real challenge would be to live up to the lessons I learned. Physical recovery was slow and often frustrating. I, who had always prided myself on my strength and endurance, now struggled to perform the simplest tasks. Every step was an effort, every deep breath an achievement. But along with physical recovery came an inner transformation. The priorities that once seemed so important, money, status, power, now seemed trivial. Instead, I found myself focusing on things I had previously neglected: relationships, compassion, the simple pleasure of being alive. Evelyn was by my side every step of the way. His strength and patience were unwavering, even when I became frustrated or discouraged. She helped me not only with my physical recovery, but also with my spiritual journey, listening to my reflections and encouraging me to explore this new path. My co-workers also visited me. Helen Fisher, in particular, spent hours with me, not talking about work or business, but simply being a friend. I realized how much I had neglected these relationships in my blind pursuit of success. As my strength returned, I began to think about the future. I knew I couldn't go back to my previous life. The thought of returning to that frenetic, self-centered existence made me physically ill. But what would I do? How could I use this second chance given to me? It was during a particularly challenging physical therapy session that I had an epiphany. As I struggled to complete a simple exercise, I saw another patient, an elderly man, having similar difficulties. Without thinking, I reached out to help him. The grateful smile he gave me lit something inside me. I realized that this was what I wanted to do with my life. Help others, make a difference, no matter how small. That night, I shared my thoughts with Evelyn. I want to change my life, I told her. I want to use my skills to help people, not to accumulate more wealth. Evelyn smiled, tears in her eyes. I knew you would find your way, she said softly, and I will be by your side no matter what you decide to do. As the sun set outside the hospital window, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead would be challenging, I knew. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. The journey to recovery was just beginning, but I already felt transformed. The near-death experience wasn't just a glimpse of the afterlife. It was a calling to live differently, to be better, and I was determined to answer that call. In the months following my release from the hospital, I experienced a profound inner transformation. Each day brought new revelations and challenges as I struggled to integrate the lessons of my near-death experience into my everyday life. The first and most obvious change was my departure from the corporate world. After much thought and discussion with Evelyn, I decided to step away from corporate law completely. It was a difficult decision, not only because of the financial aspect, but because a large part of my identity was tied to my career. When I announced my decision to my colleagues, reactions were mixed. Some, like Helen Fisher, expressed understanding and support. Others were shocked and even angry, seeing my departure as a betrayal or a sign of weakness. The senior partner, a man I had previously admired for his relentless drive for success, looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You're throwing away everything you've worked for, Blackwood," he said, his voice cold. "There is no place for sentimentality in this business." His words would have shaken me in the past, but now they only reinforced my conviction that I was making the right decision. "Maybe," I replied calmly, "but there's more to life than just business." Leaving the office for the last time was surprisingly liberating. As I walked through the busy streets of New York, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The world around me felt different, more alive, more vibrant. It was like I was seeing everything with new eyes. But the real journey was just beginning. Getting rid of old habits and thought patterns proved to be a constant challenge. There were days when I found myself slipping back into old behaviors, frantically checking emails that no longer existed, feeling a pang of envy as I saw old colleagues celebrating big deals. It was during these moments of doubt that Evelyn's constant presence and support were most crucial. She became my anchor, gently reminding me of what I had experienced and what I had decided to do with my life. "Remember, Adrian," she would say, holding my hands, "you're not just leaving something behind. You're moving toward something new and meaningful." His words always centered me, bringing me back to the purpose I had discovered. I began exploring spiritual and mindfulness practices that I previously would have dismissed as a waste of time. Meditation, yoga, philosophical readings, all these activities that once seemed frivolous to me, have now become an integral part of my day-to-day life. Meditation, in particular, has become an anchor for me. For the first few tries, I found it almost impossible to quiet my always active mind. But with practice and patience, I began to find moments of peace and clarity that reminded me of the light I experienced during my near-death experience. I also started to reevaluate my relationships. I realized how much I had neglected friendships and family ties in my single-minded pursuit of success. I made a conscious effort to reconnect with people I had left behind. One of the most meaningful reconnections was with my parents. In previous years, our interactions had become superficial and sporadic. Now I strive to be truly present in their lives. I spent an entire weekend with them, just talking, listening to their stories, and apologizing for the years of neglect. "Son," my father said, with tears in his eyes, "it's good to have you back." Those simple words meant more to me than any professional compliment I had ever received. My relationship with Evelyn has also blossomed in ways I didn't imagine were possible. For the first time, I was truly present in our marriage, not just physically, but emotionally. I discovered the pleasure of simply being with her, whether helping in her studio or just sitting together in contemplative silence. One evening, as we watched the sunset from our apartment, Evelyn turned to me with a soft smile. "You know," she said, "I've always loved you, Adrian. But now, I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time." His words perfectly captured how I felt. It was like I was rediscovering myself, unearthing parts of myself that had been stifled by years of ambition and materialism. However, not everything was easy. There were days when I felt lost, without purpose. The void left by my former career sometimes felt like an abyss. In those moments, I clung to the memory of my experience, to the sense of peace and purpose I felt in that realm of light. Gradually, I began to explore ways to give back to the community. I started volunteering at a local shelter, offering free legal advice to people who couldn't afford representation. The gratitude in the eyes of those I helped was more rewarding than any bonus I had ever received. As the months passed, I felt a fundamental shift in my perspective on life. Success, I realized, was not measured by material achievements or social status, but by the positive difference we can make in the lives of others. This inner transformation was not easy or quick. It was an ongoing process full of ups and downs, moments of clarity and periods of doubt. But each day, I felt more aligned with the truth I had experienced during my journey beyond life. Looking back at the man I was before the heart attack, I barely recognized him. That Adrian seemed like an empty shell, chasing shadows of success and happiness. The new Adrian, or perhaps the real Adrian that had always been there, buried beneath layers of conditioning and social expectations, was just beginning his journey, and for the first time in my life I was truly excited to see where this journey would take me. As the months passed, the need to find a new purpose in my life became more and more urgent. Volunteering at the local shelter was rewarding, but I felt like I could do more, that I could use my skills and experiences in a more impactful way. It was during one of my free legal advice sessions that I had an epiphany. I was helping a young single mother who was about to lose her home due to predatory lending practices that I myself had facilitated in my previous life as a corporate lawyer. As I explained their rights and the options available to them, I saw the relief and gratitude in their eyes. It was at that moment that I realized I could use my knowledge of the corporate world not to exploit people, but to protect them. In the days that followed, I researched intensively and discovered that there was a significant need for lawyers who specialized in defending consumers against large corporations. Many people were being exploited by unethical business practices, but did not have the resources or knowledge to defend themselves. I shared my idea with Evelyn, who enthusiastically supported me. "Adrian," she said, "that's perfect. You'll be using your abilities to do good, to balance the scales." With his blessing and encouragement, I began work on creating a nonprofit organization focused on providing free legal representation to people who have been victims of predatory corporate practices. The process was not easy. I had to navigate a complex bureaucracy, deal with skepticism from former colleagues, and face resistance from corporations who didn't want to see their old ways challenged. But each obstacle only strengthened my resolve. I named the organization Balanced Justice, a name that reflected my desire to correct the imbalances that I myself had helped create in the past. I used my connections in the legal world to recruit other lawyers who shared my vision, including some of my former colleagues who had been inspired by my life change. Helen Fisher was one of the first to join the cause. "You made me realize that we can use our skills for something bigger than just making money," she told me when she accepted my invitation to become part of the team. As Balanced Justice grew, I began to see the real impact we were having. Families keeping their homes, workers receiving fair compensation, consumers being protected from fraud. Each victory, no matter how small, reminded me of why I chose this path. One case in particular is etched in my memory. It was a class action lawsuit against a large pharmaceutical corporation that had deliberately hidden the dangerous side effects of one of its medications. The case was complex, and the corporation had almost unlimited resources to defend itself. For months we worked tirelessly, often pulling all-nighters, gathering evidence and building our case. It was exhausting work, but unlike the stress I felt in my previous life, this was a satisfying exhaustion, driven by a greater purpose. Judgment Day arrived, and I found myself back in a courtroom, but this time on the other side. As I presented our case, I felt a clarity and determination that I had never experienced before. I was not there to win at any cost, but to seek justice and truth. When the verdict was announced in our favor, the courtroom erupted in applause. I saw tears in the eyes of our clients, people whose lives had been devastated by the medication's side effects. At that moment, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Not the selfish triumph I usually felt when winning a case, but a deep gratitude for being able to make a difference. Evelyn was in the gallery, and when our eyes met, I saw the pride and love in her eyes. She had been by my side throughout this journey, supporting me through difficult times and celebrating every small victory. As we were leaving the courthouse, I was approached by an elderly man, one of the members of the class action lawsuit. With tears in his eyes, he shook my hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "You gave us back our dignity." His words hit me deeply, reminding me of the entity of light and its message about the true purpose of life. I realized that I had found mine. To use my skills and knowledge to give a voice to those without, to defend the defenseless. That night, sitting in our apartment with Evelyn, I reflected on how much my life had changed. The ambitious, selfish man I was seemed like a distant memory. In his place was someone who finally understood the true meaning of success and fulfillment. "Are you happy?" Evelyn asked softly, noticing my contemplative silence. I looked at her, at the woman who had been by my side through everything, and I smiled. "More than happy," I replied. "I am in peace." And it was true. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. The journey hadn't been easy, but each step had led me to this moment of clarity and purpose. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance given to me, for the opportunity to correct my mistakes and make a difference in the world. And most of all, gratitude for understanding that true wealth is not in what we accumulate for ourselves, but in what we can give to others. This was the final lesson of my near-death experience, a lesson I was determined to live every day for the rest of my life.